Welcome to Random But Memorable, a podcast from 1Password. I'm Sarah, one of the founders at 1Password.
I'm Roo, head of password manager development.
I'm Matt Davey, 1Password's chief experience officer.
I'm Anna, the producer behind the show.
And we're the hosts behind Random But Memorable. Together, we offer up bi-weekly security advice, interview special guests from the cybersecurity community, and round up the latest in security news with Watchtower Weekly. We may even play a silly security game or two. So sit back and enjoy the show.
This person has done more for online safety in their first 18 years of life than I have. So, yeah.
That's great.
That's great.
Why was there a giant pause there? That was weird.
That's the level of supportive. Woo! That's great. That's all we've got today. We're like, nope, don't like anything.
So, let's talk about one crossword. Have you seen this?
This is like 4 years old. Someone made this a while ago.
No, it's not. Someone made this in January, and I only noticed it the other day because someone shared it with me. It generates crosswords based on the passwords in your 1Password vault.
No, this is old. I've seen this years ago.
I think there was something similar, but it was designed to reveal your passwords, and it was like a phishing tool.
Oh, well, I played with that a lot. No, I think I've seen this.
Okay, this is none of those things.
All right.
There is a password game. This thing says it came out on the 15th of January, 2025, which is this year.
All right, I'm going to need Anna to come in and talk to us about what other games have been created based on our show. I'm not going back through all the show notes.
This is not created based on our show. We have never talked about building a crossword out of...
Someone made a game based on the podcast. I'm not going crazy.
Okay, considering you, for the first 10 minutes of the episode didn't have your microphone turned on. All
right. Matt, talk to us about one crossword. It looks great.
It looks pretty fun. So it's very simple. It is using the 1Password CLI tool, and essentially it fetches some of your passwords from 1Password, generates a crossword. I'm assuming it does this locally. I have not checked this. Maybe read up on it. Maybe look at the source code before you run this. I actually would just watch the video. I think it's fun. So it fetches passwords, it generates a crossword based on it, and then has a UI for kind of solving the crossword. I think that's kind of fun.
It's fantastic.
I love how our users can just do stuff. You know what I mean? There's all the CLI tools out there. There's all this kind of stuff, and you can just do fun things, and you can make it exciting for what you want it to do. It's great that we have that option. I
will just add, I think this is better probably if you use the word list passwords. Because if you're generating just nonsense, that's absolutely fine. But also, this isn't going to be a very useful crossword. The thing I like the most about this is, in order to run this with a short word list, instead of using your passwords, you use the option, I am a coward and a baby, invoke with test word list.
I can't endorse this, just so we're very clear. I don't recommend that anyone actually use this.
Oh, there's no way we're endorsing this. I think this person built it out of their own amusement with no idea that other people would actually use it.
That's probably fair.
Does that mean you could build a crossword from anything? That seems quite cool.
How about that?
Well,
delightful. Really just, you know what? I love it. Great job. Great job.
You turned yourself around pretty quickly there. I think anything that uses your passwords, we probably recommend against.
Correct. Yes. But you know what? I do love that someone built this on top of 1Password tools. That's fun. That's genuinely fun. All right. Well, before we get into the show, let's talk about the guest we have coming up today, because I have a feeling you will be in awe of them as much as I was. Later on in the show, I'll be chatting with Chris McCarty. Chris is an activist and the founder of Quit Clicking Kids, an organization dedicated to advocating for children's rights in the digital age. Chris is still a junior at the university, and I was so unbelievably impressed with the work they're doing to change legislation and write new bills to provide legal protections for children online. We cover all of that and so much more. It really is one hell of an interview. Maybe that'll be my new tagline. One hell of an interview.
Why do you need a new tagline? What's wrong with the old one? Why do you have to change things, Roo?
What, from drop it in here? I think this will be an addition. One hell of an interview.
Oh, in addition.
Yeah.
Have either of you watched the new series Adolescence on Netflix?
Sophia watched it. I have not.
Yes. Isn't it awful? I mean, awful and brilliant.
Okay, I haven't watched it. I've heard nothing but good, if you have teenagers, they should be watching this. You should be looking at and it's just a big giant critique on social media and how involved people should be without being graphic. But I'm always nervous to watch stuff like anything sad because I just don't need extra sad. So is it sad?
I would say it's not sad, but it is harrowing. I think that's a good description of it. It is slow-paced and harrowing throughout.
Well, thanks for that. Now I really know whether or not I should watch it.
It's also a technical masterpiece.
Yes, it was all filmed. Each episode was filmed in one shot, and they filmed each one 10 times and then just picked the best one.
Interesting.
That is madness. And it's all drones and...
I thought you were going to say on an iPhone.
Yeah, but it's filmed on a drone, and then someone obviously catches a drone and then zooms in with it on someone's face and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I haven't watched the behind the scenes. That's what I'm guessing happens.
You would recommend it?
I very much would, yes. But if you don't like sad stuff, there's not a lot of happiness in it, I will say.
Do you walk away feeling like there's hope for tomorrow?
No. Okay. No, absolutely not.
Okay.
God.
Absolutely not.
I'm going to stick with Wallace and Gromit.
Okay. I think that's good. All right, let's move on to some Watchtower Weekly. This is our longest running segment where we like to discuss some of the recent security stories hitting the news. So this one is about Microsoft announcing security AI agents to help overwhelmed humans. It's from The Verge. Microsoft has launched its AI-powered security copilot a year ago to bring a chatbot to the cybersecurity space. And now it's expanding with its AI agents that are designed to autonomously assist overwhelmed security teams. Do you both know what an AI agent is? Let's start there.
I do, yes.
So I keep hearing about all of this, and the more I hear about it, and agentic AI, which I think agentic AI is just a different way of saying AI agent. So it sounds less like a person, but it's just a tool, right?
We should create a new company called Agentic. That would be fun.
Oh, it has to already exist, right?
Oh, probably. They're probably very angry that everyone is using their company name and they're getting no trademark for it.
Agentic.ai. Look at that.
But these are just the robots, right? These agents, these are just, you are a robot that's designed to do this, and this is what you've been programmed to do, and that's go out and do that, right?
Yeah, so there's two parts to it. So an AI agent is like a helper that can understand what you want, make plans to get it done, and then go and do the work by using different computer tools. And it learns over time about how to do that better. And then this other thing that came in very recently is called the MCP, which is, I believe, the Model Context Protocol. And that was created by Anthropic, who I believe make Claude AI. And they, this MCP open protocol thing. So it's open, it's available to all AIs, and it's kind of like a standard, which is really cool because this standard has been stood up incredibly quickly compared to some others. But MCP basically implements this thing that gives us a common format so that the whole industry can hook up to these tools, and it's straightforward, and the agent understands how each tool works and knows what to do with it. So AI agents can connect using this open protocol, and it's basically so the standard can expose what a tool does. So if you use it for security things, you could say, okay, anytime this happens, go and do this. Or hey, can you constantly check what devices are looking and how they are and all this kind of stuff. And when the agent kind of jumps in, it has specialized context and knowledge and information about that kind of thing, which is really cool. But of course, interesting thing that unfolds with the MCP is that there is no authorization or authentication built into it. So you are essentially allowing robots to go around and do things, and it's just oh, they've logged into the entire product, therefore, they have admin rights or something. It's kind of wild. But yeah, so Microsoft is unveiling 6 of its own AI agents for Security Copilot, as well as 5 that have already been created by its partners. So Microsoft's 6 security agents will be available in preview soon. They are designed to do things like triage and process phishing and data loss alerts, prioritize critical incidents, and monitor for vulnerabilities. So, yeah, I'm going to assume this is built on that open standard as well.
This is fantastic. I love this. We're starting to see some really great real-world applications of large language models, and
yes,
this is one of those things that they excel at, right? Which is like finding patterns in data and things like that. So putting them in place to watch for, increases in traffic or oddities around traffic and stuff like that is very, very cool. I love it.
The processing phishing stuff gets into a fully service to service, criminal to enforcement layer.
Yeah.
Which I kind of think there should be a movie about. I think that's a really good kind of premise for a movie where no humans are involved in phishing anymore, but it's just all robots trying to trick each other.
I love that. That would be great. Yeah.
Okay, so the corporate vice president of Microsoft Security spoke on the news, saying that the 6 Microsoft Security Copilot agents enable teams to autonomously handle high-volume security and IT tasks while seamlessly integrating with Microsoft's security solutions. Microsoft is also working with OneTrust, Avatrix, Blue Voyant, Tanium, and Fletch to enable some third-party security agents. These extensions will make it easier to analyze data breaches with OneTrust or perform kind of root cause analysis of network outages and failures with Avatrix. AI agents are becoming an increasingly popular way for companies like Microsoft to sell businesses on AI tools. Microsoft launched its Copilot for Business earlier this year with free AI chat and access to pay-as-you-go AI agents. How much in the kind of generalized view of AI, which I think AI is going the way of wellness, where everything is AI and everything has to do with wellness. I'm a bit bored of both. I'm a bit bored of AI. It's too much. There's too much about it. This is a great use, and I feel like no one is hearing about this because there's some Studio Ghibli make yourself look like a Muppet thing going on at the same time. So AI is everywhere, and I don't think people actually differentiate between this is a cool gimmick and something like this, where it's being used to triage something that humans will spend hours looking at phishing attacks and seeing, okay, is this really how does this work? And this thing can just probably do it a lot quicker if you train it.
I mean, all of it is necessary right now, even the nonsense.
Even the Studio Ghibli stuff. You think that's necessary?
Yes, it's all necessary.
Oh.
Yeah, because
my Instagram is just full of it.
I know. Yeah.
I have not seen a single thing on that, so I'm somewhat sad and grateful at the same time.
Do you want to see what I look like as a Muppet?
Yes.
This is the new OpenAI image model.
But I think that the thing with the OpenAI, all of this kind of stuff, is that it gets people like me comfortable with AI. It gets the words out. It gets people understand it more. There's that comfort. There's the ability to make it seem like something that's approachable, so that some of the stuff that I need to do, then when I'm how do I go and do something, I can just go and do it. I know, so Dave is a big user, and I was writing an email and I was I just can't get the words right. This is the email I have, and I'm this is a run-on sentence that's 3 lines long. I just can't. And he's copy your email over here into this and tell it what you want it to look like. Tell it to just check for grammar and make it nice and tight. And then I did it, and I was oh, thank you. My brain just couldn't, the rest of the way, and it just did it. I think the avatars and all of that make it easier. So then when something like this comes up and I'm oh, I could use this tool, there's just that level of trust, which is also increasingly scary, because then there's the lack of critical thinking of what do I install on here. And while I was doing that, Matt as a Muppet did not disappoint.
You are very right, Sarah. In the fact that these things make you comfortable with this. I completely agree. But at the same time, everything is AI. Everything, just anything that anybody talks about, especially in a business context. And it's just, I don't think society can yet differentiate between gimmick and usefulness. And I think it makes things like this, where we're talking about AI agents, seem like that they are the same level of AI as turning me into a Muppet. So, this next one from Bleeping Computer. The FBI is warning that fake online document converters are being used to steal people's information and, in worst case scenarios, to deploy ransomware on victims' devices. Have you seen these things? Like, I need a photo changing from like an AVIF to a JPEG or something. And, there's an online converter to do so.
Oh, yeah.
There are hundreds of these things for all of the different file formats and that kind of thing. I bought a font off a website. It came in a RAR file. Do you remember those? Do you remember when everything came in a RAR file?
Oh, yeah.
And like, what am I supposed to do with that now? I did end up having to use one of these online document converters because I was like, I don't.
Ugh.
And so I downloaded this RAR file and I was like, I have no idea what is in this. So I was like using virus checkers and all that kind of stuff, and yeah, turns out it was fine. But like, these things are useful. That's the problem with having it as a security issue. So the warning came last week from the FBI after receiving an increasing number of reports about these types of tools. The FBI says that cybercriminals are creating websites that promote free document converts, download tools, or file merging tools. I've had to do that as well, like merge two audio files. Woof. So, the FBI warned, to conduct this scheme, cybercriminals across the globe are using any type of free document converter or downloader tool. This might be a website claiming to convert one file type to another, such as a .doc to a .pdf. It might also claim to combine files, such as joining multiple JPEGs into one PDF. The suspect program might claim to be an MP3 or MP4 downloading tool. While the online tools work as advertised, the FBI say the resulting file might actually contain malware that has been used to gain remote access to the infected device. The uploaded documents can be also scraped for sensitive information such as names, social security numbers, cryptocurrency seeds, passphrases, wallet addresses, email addresses, passwords, and banking information. The Public Affairs Office for the FBI in Denver said the scammers try to mimic URLs that are legit. While the FBI told Bleeping Computer that they could not share any further technical details as it would let the scammers know what is working, threat actors have been known to utilize these tools to deploy malware. A cybersecurity researcher known for tracking the bootloader infection, I mean, that's a brilliant name, 10 out of 10, also reported in November about a Google advertising campaign that promoted fake file converter sites. These sites pretended to convert your files, but instead caused you to download the bootloader malware. The researcher explained, visiting this WordPress site, I found a form for uploading a PDF to convert it to a .x inside a zip file, but after passing certain checks, users instead received a .js file inside the zip rather than a genuine .x. This JavaScript file is bootloader, a malware known for downloading additional malware such as banking trojans, info stealers, malware downloaders, and post-exploitation tools like Cobalt Strike beacons. Using these additional payloads, the threat actors breach corporate networks and spread laterally to other computers. You can see these things being used in a business context all the time, right? Like, the amount of time you get like 5 JPEGs together and you're like,
oh, yeah.
Do I really want to open like a design tool to put these together in a PDF? Whoa. And attacks like this have been led to full-blown ransomware attacks in the past, such as those by Revil and Blacksuit. While not all file converters are malware, it's essential to research them before using and check reviews before downloading any programs. If a site is relatively unknown, it's probably better to avoid it altogether. Yeah, there are some well-known ones out there, and there is everything else. And there's ones that are obviously dodgy in nature anyway. Getting anything from a YouTube video and having a file format at the end is probably not the most legitimate of websites. So yeah, careful out there.
Don't download random things.
Yeah, it's hard though, isn't it? Like I do see with this, like,
it is.
What are you supposed to do with 5 JPEGs that you want as a PDF? Does Preview do that?
Preview does that.
Okay, probably do it in Preview.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't need to do anything anymore because I'm on a Mac and it just does it.
I thought you were going to say you just ask AI to do it. That's probably not bad. I wonder if you could do that. Just ask Claude or OpenAI, hey, can you make these 5 JPEGs? And then it will draw you a Studio Ghibli version of what those JPEGs would look like.
Make your JPEG into a Muppet.
All right, now that we've wrapped up the security news, let's move on to my interview with Chris McCarty. We cover a lot of ground in this interview, exploring everything from the rise of sharenting, aka sharing parenting moments online, to how Gen Z can advocate for their own privacy. We also touch on the inspiring work Chris is doing to provide legal protections for children featured in monetized online content. There's so much good stuff in here, and I can't wait for you all to hear from Chris McCarty. So that being said, I think we can drop it in here. Joining me on the show today is Chris McCarty. Chris is an activist and the founder of Quit Clicking Kids, an organization dedicated to advocating for children's rights in the digital age. Chris launched Quit Clicking Kids during their senior year of high school after learning that child social media stars lack the same rights and protections as traditional child actors. Quit Clicking Kids has been instrumental in promoting legislative changes to safeguard minors from exploitation on social media platforms. Their advocacy has inspired bills in states like Washington and Illinois, aiming to provide legal protections for children featured in monetized online content. Chris, I am hugely impressed just from reading all of that. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you're currently a junior at the University of Washington, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I think you may be our youngest guest ever, which I think is fantastic. How have you accomplished so much already? How are you balancing your advocacy work against schoolwork?
That's a great question. A large part of it is because my research work aligns with my passions. So I'm currently a university student. I'm a double major in political science and Chinese. I've been interested in government from a young age, so it certainly helps that my passion project is aligned with my passions.
That's very cool.
It is difficult to balance the two, but I think ultimately, like, the purpose of me pursuing higher education is to make those types of real world changes. So ultimately, as much as I can tie what I'm learning in the classroom to what I'm pursuing on my own, I think the better suited I am, not only in terms of my future career, but in terms of just integrating all those different styles of learning and making a real and positive change.
That's awesome. That's very cool. Okay. What's the origin story behind Quit Clicking Kids? Which, I'm going to be honest, I can't believe I haven't flubbed saying that yet. It is definitely a good name because it is actually easy to say.
I'm glad.
What made you realize that this was something that you wanted to champion?
It started actually with a couple of different things. One of them was a Girl Scout project. So this for people not familiar with Girl Scouts, we have a system called Higher Awards. So we have a Gold Award, which is the equivalent of a Boy Scout Eagle Scout Award. And essentially what that entails is that you have to make a positive and lasting change in your community. So one of the ways that they propose you can do this is to change a law. That's one of the less common routes that people tend to go down. But again, public policy nerd, that sounded right up my alley. And that coincided with a lot of research I was doing around family influencers. And really what got me started on family influencers as something that I wanted to tackle was not actually because I was watching those influencing accounts myself. Even though I'm a member of Gen Z, I'm not really on social media very much just for entertainment purposes. It actually started with reading a news story about a now infamous family influencer who had adopted a special needs child from outside of the country. The video where she brought him home was viewed 5.5 million times. She made a huge series of monetized content featuring this kid. One of the things that was more notable was having her followers donate money to unlock pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that would make his face. So his name, his face, his story were everywhere. And then a couple of years in, all of a sudden, he just stopped appearing in that family's videos. And that prompted a pretty significant backlash because all of the followers of the account were saying, "You used to have another kid. What happened? Where did he go?" And the parents then made what I would argue is now the sort of stereotypical YouTuber apology video where they said, we relinquished custody of the child, but we didn't want to make that decision public in an effort to respect his privacy. And so that statement about respecting his privacy kind of contrasted with the depth and consistency of information that they had been sharing about him previously and the way that they were using his name and likeness not only just to really kind of share every step of the adoption journey, but also the way that they were monetizing that information. So that really prompted me to do more research in, okay, what does it mean to be a family influencer? What kind of goes on behind the scenes that maybe isn't captured in the videos? And how can we make sure that these kids are protected?
What are your thoughts on the rise of sharing parenting moments online and how it affects
children's future privacy? Because we are definitely like well within the time frame where people are having kids and those kids are growing up and now have online presences of their own that could sort of like come back on them in very surprising ways.
Definitely. I think it's really important for parents, especially, to consider the ways in which online content doesn't always die. In fact, quite frequently, it's a very permanent thing to share something online. It can be screenshotted, it can be downloaded. And I think we're seeing with the rise of AI technologies, with the rise of reverse image searching, it's very increasingly easy to be able to find out everything about a person just from their name or just from their image and kind of pull up everything that they've been associated with on the internet. So I think that what initially seems like, oh, we're just sharing this moment online, it's a one-time thing, it doesn't matter that much. I think you have to be careful about, okay, well, how many of those one-time moments are you actually sharing online? Are you building out a comprehensive picture of your family life just from those individual posts? And that's something that I think you have to be mindful of as a parent, is like, how much of a full story am I giving to the people that are following me? Do I know the people who are following me, or are just strangers getting access to this information? I think kind of taking a look at that broader picture is really important.
Do you think that parents are aware of the risks of building this comprehensive online version of their kids, a vision of their kids?
I think certainly some parents are. I think the trouble is that not all of them are. So I think there's a lot more education that needs to happen in this space just to make sure that people are following best practices. I think I'm very fortunate in a lot of ways to have grown up in Gen Z, so that the Gen Xers and the millennials could kind of teach me about how to be safe online. I think there were a lot of, like I said, I was in Girl Scouts, and then the school that I went to and my parents, they all taught me about media literacy and here's how you be safe online. Don't share your full name, don't share your birthday, don't share your location, all of this kind of stuff. And I think now we're kind of seeing almost like a turnabout where a lot of the influencer parents are just sharing all of that information that they're telling their kids to be careful with. So I think there is sort of this weird, like, yes, it's understood in some ways, but not in others. Another important aspect for parents to consider is the idea that there's often, it feels safer to post some things online because there's this perceived distance between the parent and then whoever is interacting with the content. It's like, oh, well, they're just commenting online and they don't really have access to like anything in my real life. But I think it's important to know that you don't necessarily know where those people are commenting from, and that artificial distance is artificial. As part of the research for this project, I pulled comments from a really popular family influencing account's Instagram, and you see things like, I saw you at the mall today and you look so beautiful, under this comment of this young child. And so I think that that hopefully helps underscore to parents that if you don't know who your follower base is, there are definitely people who can interact with it with perhaps not the best intentions. And it's important to know that they might be far away, but they might not. And just be mindful of the types of things that you're sharing and how that could be potentially used against you or your children in the future.
Yeah. Eesh. God, that's so creepy. I don't like it. All right, let's pivot to legislation. Can you talk about some of the key legislative moments that you've reached or that you're working towards? And what has the response been from lawmakers as you've been showing up on the scene?
Definitely. To me, the first milestone, one of the biggest milestones, was actually just getting a bill crafted in Washington state. So this was in 2021 to 2022, that legislative session for Washington. And that was just a lot of me cold calling and cold emailing legislators in Washington state and saying, hey, here's the problem. So I laid it out kind of as we have been talking about it here today. There's a lack of privacy for these children. There's also the fact that a lot of these accounts are really significantly monetized. For example, there's a report from Credit Karma that said accounts with 1 million subscribers that post every week can make up to $900,000 a year from Google's AdSense revenue program. So that's just through one platform, that's just through YouTube. And 1 million subscribers is actually at the lower end of where a lot of really popular YouTube accounts are. it is a lot of money that these people are bringing in. And especially because they're a family influencing account, they're relying on filming family dynamics. They're relying on filming their children. And so in a way, you see children kind of becoming the breadwinners of the family, similar to the way that traditional child actors would be. But there's no protections for the children to ensure that their percentage of the money is actually being saved for them. So I took those issues together. I said, I think that we need to mirror the Coogan laws, which protect traditional child actors. They set aside 15% of a child's earnings in a locked trust account. I think we also need to have a provision of the bill that protects a child's privacy. So once they reach the age of 18, they can request a social media platform to delete content that featured them when they were a minor. And together, I think those form a pretty comprehensive set of protections for child influencers. And so that was the bill that was initially drafted in Washington State. It was me and a nonpartisan council staff member that kind of got together, had an hour-long phone call, put all the bill text together. That was really significant because it was the first of its kind. And that later went on to be adopted really by the Illinois state legislature and then later by California and Minnesota as well. And now there are a plethora of other states who are introducing bills. But the fact that we have that initial bill and then 3 laws that now exist to protect these new child stars, to me, is just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, that's really cool. Are there states that you are looking at that have potentially a higher concentration of this type of account, this type of social media presence, where you think that legislation could do a lot of good?
Definitely. I think there are some states that tend to have higher concentration of not only influencers, but of just general entertainers, which is why the California bill being signed into law was so exciting. But I also hope that ultimately we can get federal protections in place just to ensure that kids in every state have access to the same baseline level of protections.
What about the social media platforms themselves? Do you think that they're doing enough to protect kids' privacy, or do you think that there's more needed there?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more to be done in the realm of protecting kids' privacy, especially online. And one of the things that I hope to see is a greater prevalence of those right to be forgotten provisions. I think it's really important that we do allow anybody, but especially kids who were shared online without their consent, the right to request a social media platform to delete something that featured them that they're not comfortable with sharing. I think another kind of common misconception is that, like, oh, I can share my kid, like, having a bad day or having a tantrum or whatever because they don't really care. It's like, okay, well, they might not care in the moment necessarily. I think even then some might. But where are they going to be in 5-10 years? Where are they going to be when, like, if somebody Googles their name, the first video that comes up is this tantrum video of them? I think it's important to think about how those things tend to last and how they could continue to impact a child's future relationships, and even more than that, their relationship with their teachers, their friends, their potential bosses, anybody who can Google their name and see what they're associated with.
Okay, it probably hasn't been a smooth road, I have to imagine, for all of this legislation that you've pushed through. What have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced?
That's a great question. For me, one of the biggest challenges has been trying to get legislators to think about this issue proactively. I think a lot of times with legislation, we wait for something to become a huge issue and then we scramble to legislate it after the fact. And because this industry of family influencing is so new, there's not a lot of reliable firsthand accounts that we can get. And so I think a lot of legislators have a hard time understanding that this is a real issue that we need to work on. And one of the ways that I've been able to kind of mitigate that is by looking at all of the various proxies that we have. So, for example, we have a really well-documented toddler to train wreck pipeline for traditional child actors. We can see the ways in which growing up in the public eye has affected so many of these young lives. We can also see numerous instances of child entertainers whose money was stripped from them by their parents or by people who were close to them. So we have that angle, and it's already been well-researched, well-documented. We also have adults who are now in their mid-20s who grew up on non-monetized family blogs with a B. So there's not video content, there's not the financial aspect of it, but there is still kind of sharing every detail of that person's life to the blog. One of those individuals is a personal friend of mine who their parent had shared every detail of their diagnoses and had shared pictures of them in the hospital. and really just didn't seem to be there for the child as much as wanting to take pictures of things for the blog. So we have that as well as a very well documented, again, not quite the same as modern day influencing, but a pretty good understanding of how the precursor is shaping our current field. And then finally, we do have growing research in this field. It's very small right now, but even without those firsthand accounts, the silver lining of the parents sharing so much information about their kids is that pediatricians and child psychologists are already starting to analyze just the content that's online and saying, hey, some of these things that you're sharing, these could be potentially harmful later on in this child's life. So we do have sort of these ways to figure out if this industry continues to go unregulated, here's the potential impacts, here's the potential harm. So really trying to get legislators to focus on that instead of, well, currently it doesn't look like anybody's really having a problem with this, but again, in like 5 to 10 years, where would we be if we continue to allow this to go unregulated?
I really like the pediatrician angle. Inroads there could potentially make a pretty big impact, because something as simple as a pediatrician handing out a pamphlet during a visit to be like, hey, this is just something you might not have thought about that you should probably think about. It, covers research and impact and stuff like that. And if we can get even one person to be like, oh, geez, I didn't think about that when I was like live blogging all this stuff that's happening with my kid right now. Like it's a really interesting angle. Other avenues, other ways that you've seen that are starting to help raise awareness. Are there TV shows? Is this showing up in media in places that you think is actually having an impact, or otherwise sort of becoming a little bit more, being introduced more to the mainstream?
I think it's starting to. I was fortunate enough to be a guest on Demi Lovato's documentary Child Star, where, again, it was focused primarily on traditional child actors, but then they brought me in at the end to sort of talk about the new generation of child stars, the family influencers, the child influencers, who are facing a lot of the same issues. So I think kind of that mainstream media recognition is very helpful. And I think aside from that, I know there are series that are starting to come out about infamous family vloggers. So, for example, Micah Stauffer and Ruby Franke, and kind of focusing on those extreme cases of family influencers. And I think that's helpful to start getting people thinking about, okay, family influencing looks fun and spontaneous and easy, but is it really? But I think it's important to focus on the cases that aren't just like those extreme cases. Any kind of family influencer needs to be really critical and really thoughtful about the type of work that they're asking their child to do. They need to try and ask for their child's consent as much as possible. Obviously, children can't legally consent, but there is, I think, a baseline obligation of parents to sort of gauge how much their child is interested in what they're doing, how much their child wants to be in it. I think those are the primary things. I certainly think that as many of the children on today's influencing accounts continue to grow up and feel free to speak out about their stories as they leave their family influencing sort of life behind, I think we'll have a lot more of those kind of first-person accounts. I anticipate a lot of memoirs on the horizon that sort of detail their experiences. Sherry Franke's, for example, just came out. So I think this is an issue that will only continue to grow.
I have to imagine that it's challenging to raise these conversations about online privacy, especially when folks might not see it as a critical concern. So like, what's the inroad there that you are trying to leverage?
There's two primary aspects to Quit Clicking Kids, one of which we've already covered, is the legislative advocacy, but the other one is really focused on education. So, for example, I have a Quit Clicking Kids website, and that's where not only do I track like the state-by-state legislative process, but I also track the different articles that are coming out about different family influencers, about new research in the field, about the types of people who interact and engage with these accounts, and why it's important to be wary of who is interacting and engaging with your account. So through that lens, I hope to really bring people to the idea that it's okay. You can start and just really start learning. You don't have to be an expert in the field, but I think it is important to sort of turn your critical thinking brain back on when you're engaging with social media that features kids. I think primarily social media features as a place where we can just kind of turn our brains off and relax and have fun. And I certainly use social media for that. But I think when we see content that features kids, that's when it's really important to ask ourselves, okay, what are the implications of this? What might filming this have looked like? I've spoken with people who were former child influencers, and one of the things that they said is that they were filming for this channel that did a lot of like fun challenges and whatever, but they were filming 10-hour days. That's not something that comes across just from watching the videos, but in a lot of ways, again, very similar to child acting, right? There's just a lot that goes on behind the scenes. The difference is that it's much harder to regulate because it's in the house and not on the set.
Yeah. Oh. 10-hour days. 10-hour filming days for a kid. That is wild. And as you said, completely unregulated. Do you have guidance for how you think influencers can balance the responsibility around content creation with the respect for their children's privacy?
I think there are some ways to be a more or less balanced influencer. One of the key ways is focusing more on your own story than your kid's story. So, for example, there are some family influencers who want to detail their child's like medical health journey or like their mental health journey. And I think that part of the reason they do that is not to be malicious, but it's to find a community of parents and of children who are going through similar struggles and to offer their advice. But I do think it's possible to share that story just from your perspective as a parent without sharing personally identifiable information about your kid. I think there are more measured ways to kind of build that community that don't rely on sharing such in-depth information about your child, and especially in ways that makes it easy for other people to find out that information about them that maybe they would rather people didn't know. I think that's one of the most important things.
Are there ways for children, especially older children, to start to take responsibility for their own privacy, even in the absence of some legislation? We have a generation who is growing up online, who has grown up online. Are there tips for folks to better control their digital footprint and help protect their online privacy?
I think when it comes to an individual, it just comes back to that common sense sort of don't share your name, don't share your image, don't share your birthday, don't share your location. And I know that that's difficult, especially in a world where social media is increasingly used as a means to connect people. And I don't want to be like this harbinger of doom. I think social media has a lot of great qualities. I do think a lot of the community building aspects of it are wonderful. But I think as much as possible, being mindful about what you share, keeping an eye on who's following you, making sure that you know your followers at least to some degree, just to make sure that like they aren't trying to engage with you inappropriately. And especially, again, if you're featuring people who are not you in your social media account, making sure that you obtain consent from them as best as you can. Whether that be a child or even just your friend or even like one of your parents, making sure it's like, hey, I was planning to post this picture or this video, but you're in it. Are you okay with that? And maybe showing them what they look like in the post or the video and making sure that they can kind of see what they're being a part of and agree to it. I think one of the key things for me about the issue of family influencing is the idea of consent, which of course kids can't legally do, but again, kind of gauging their interest, because ideally consent should follow the FRIES acronym, which is consent should be freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. And I think when you apply that to child influencers, it's really easy to see how this falls short. Freely given, I think, is one of the biggest problems here, because in a lot of cases the parents are becoming the bosses of the children. So arguably one of the biggest conflicts of interest there are, especially when the children are still like living under their parents' roof, they're not fully adults yet. There's definitely that pressure to perform, to be a part of the channel, to keep making money, especially if one of the forms that they have are like these affiliate links, these sponsorship deals where people are paying them to go on trips and have all these wonderful experiences. I think that does kind of put a lot of pressure on the kids to perform and to keep performing. Reversible goes to that about how social media is very, very difficult to reverse, which is, again, part of why the legislation says, no, once kids reach the age of 18, they should be allowed to request content deletion. And I think the last three aspects all kind of go together. It's very, very difficult to get informed consent from a child who I can't imagine asking an 8-year-old, so you're going to be featured in this video. are you okay with that? Here are the 5 to 10 year implications of this. And, how does that make you feel? Right? It's very, very tricky to kind of get that, which really hinders the ability to have enthusiastic or specific consent. So I think that's another important angle to consider is, as much as possible, try to gauge people's level of want and desire to be a part of the channel, and be mindful that even though the legal consent can't be there, there might be all of these other factors that may be influencing someone's decision.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As a parent, like, it is our responsibility to protect and watch out for our kids and make these decisions that they are not able to make. And what a rough position for a child to be in when that parent is sort of having to choose between like 6-figure income and like their child's privacy. Like, that's a wild situation for anyone to be in.
Absolutely.
If this type of advocacy is resonating with people where they're like, "Oh, this sounds great. Like, I want to advocate for stronger online privacy protections." If folks want to drive change here, how can they get started? Like, how do they do so?
A really good way to start is going on the Quit Clicking Kids website, because we have a lot of great resources there on how to connect with legislators. So, for example, there's a website called Statescape, and they tell you when the legislative session starts and stops for each of the states. They give you a full list of all the members in both of the houses for each state. Super, super useful. And then also on the Quit Clicking Kids website, we have email templates. So you don't have to craft your own email. You can just copy and paste. It's super easy, super streamlined. Another thing is we have a change.org petition, which is now a federal petition to try and get federal legislators mobilized on this cause. So kind of different tiers of involvement depending on how motivated you are for the issue. Obviously, both are really wonderful. And if you have any further questions, you can reach out through the Quit Clicking Kids website itself.
Nice. If we look ahead, what changes would you like to see in how society approaches online privacy for kids and for adults?
One of the biggest things that I would want to see is this recognition that kids have their own lives and their own struggles. They need a childhood. They need to have some semblance of privacy when they grow up and know that every embarrassing moment or funny sentence is not going to be shared online the next day. To have somebody that they can speak to in confidence and just have a family member instead of a content creator. And I think a big part of that is if you were to flip the script and if you were to have a 16-year-old who made a monetized family social media account that just only featured her mom. And so like every day, 24/7, consistently updating content about her mom through monetized channel. And it was just things like, wow, dinner today was really horrible, or like, oh my God, she was fighting with my dad today, or like, oh, this presentation at work kind of fell through. I think people would have a very strong knee-jerk reaction to like, well, that's not okay, let alone from the privacy aspect, but also the fact that you're using your mom's distress to kind of bring in the clicks and make money for yourself. That's not an appropriate thing to do. And I think if you translate that to like, oh, instead of a presentation that didn't go well at work, it's a bad grade at school, or instead of, fighting with a husband, it's fighting with a friend. I think suddenly, somehow, when it's a child who's going through it, we have this idea of like, oh, it's not that important. It doesn't really matter. It's kind of just funny. We need to start thinking more critically about, no, that's still the real person. Their emotions and their feelings are still real at this stage. Even if they weren't, again, looking forward to that like 5 to 10 years in the future, how are they going to feel about all of these personal moments shared about them online?
I love that role reversal, a way of framing. That is a very effective way to approach this.
I'm glad.
Yeah. Okay. Finally, where can folks go if they want to learn more about the work that you're doing or about Quit Clicking Kids?
Pretty easy. You can just go to the Quit Clicking Kids website, which is quitclickingkids.com. You can also go to the Instagram, which is Quit Clicking Kids.
Very nice. Well, Chris, thank you. This was wonderful. I appreciate you taking the time. Very informative.
Thank you so much.
So that was one hell of an interview with Chris McCarty, a truly inspiring individual. And if you enjoyed that interview, took something from it, or want to discuss anything that we've talked about in today's show, you can head on over to onepassword.community. There's a dedicated page for Random But Memorable where you can comment on every episode. We'll leave a link to that and everything else we've mentioned today in the show notes.
Excellent. Thank you, Roo. And encourage everyone to head over to the 1password.community site. There's lots of good stuff going on there. There's already been some fun comments from some of our listeners, so thank you for that. All right, it's time to go over to Ask 1Password. This is the segment where we get to answer your listener questions, and hopefully you can get the answers that you need. And today's email comes from Ronnie. Hi, Roo. I've been loving the show lately and particularly enjoyed the guest on the last episode. As a parent, I'm worried about my kid having a private 1Password vault where I can't see what they're saving or have access to it in case they forget the password. So my question for you is, how would you recommend parents use 1Password with kids who are too young to fully understand security? Thanks to the whole Random But Memorable team. Ronnie.
Okay. Ronnie, what do you think your kids are putting in 1Password?
Yeah, I think it's kind of, I think personally, I want to have them have a private vault because I think it kind of teaches them the separation of like, this is a you thing. This is your Roblox account. You need to be responsible for it. This is how you get access to it. And this is what you need to do. And I think it teaches that sort of responsibility. Like they're not going to have their own credit cards for quite some time until they have all of that. But you know, you'd have your share vaults that you can access Wi-Fi and stuff like that. But like, if they want to make 30 different accounts on a contest site so they can enter all these different things, I think it's a way to sort of let them have some independence online. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Ronnie, I would really encourage you to let your kids have a 1Password vault. You could set up one that is shared with you and set up the preferences such that items get put in that shared vault by default, and that would be a way for you to sort of keep some visibility. I definitely think that, yeah, as Sarah said, like giving them the ability to learn in a safe place is a really great option here. So I would say embrace it. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, I think you want to teach those moments. I think that's a good thing. I think there's something to be said about, you know, having the conversations around, oh, you know, I can't do this or I can't do that. And I think the opportunity then becomes when they're small and then they all of a sudden can't remember what their account password is and they can't log into 1Password. So you as a family organizer can recover their accounts. So you want to make sure that you're setting that up for yourself as the family organizer, and then you want to set up a secondary family organizer. But if anyone, like whether that's one of the kids, whether that's your spouse, whether that's your mom, your dad, grandma, grandpa, anybody like that, they forget it, you can go in and reset it. And when you do the account recovery, it doesn't delete everything that's in there. You can re-access all your stuff, then you can get back in. And that also teaches kind of that good, like have a backup, have plans.
Yep. Agreed.
So with that, I think that takes us into where we're going with our Ask listeners for more questions that they might have that we could have for both Ask 1Password, or if they have any of those super alternative security question randomnesses that they'd really like us to get into. So they can be weird. They can be wonderful. We won't judge. podcast@1password.com. Send them over.
Agreed.
You can also use the community site to comment instead of emailing it in.
Yeah.
Yep.
All of the above.
All right, let's close up the show today with some alternative security questions. And it's now our favorite part of the show because we get to play the jingle.
It's alternative security questions. The game show that answers the questions that no one asked for.
Traditional security questions are outdated and not particularly secure, so here we get to suggest some alternative security questions with less predictable answers. This week, Sarah and Matt will create fake answers to random questions, and as the host, I will award points for my favorite answer. We play 3 rounds and answer 3 alternative security questions. First up, what's the title of the book you'd write about your most boring day? Matt, why don't you lead us off?
Oh, it's easy. It would be called Wednesdays.
Nice. Fantastic. I like that.
Also known as the day we record.
Sarah, what about you?
I would just go with Sarah doesn't know what to do. You know?
I like that as the name of a children's book. I think that's brilliant.
That's a good children's book title.
I don't know what I would do with a boring day. I don't know.
Okay, straight after this, I'm going to go into AI and I'm going to get it to write one of those, like, you know, rhyming tone books as a children's book, but for Sarah doesn't know what to do.
Yep.
I like that.
Yep. Should she do the laundry? Should she scrub the toilet? She should not.
Google Gemini answered by saying the book would be called The Algorithmic Amble, A Day in the Life of a Large Language Model.
Oh, that's quite sad, isn't it?
It sure is.
I sometimes do kind of anthropomorphize these things as like being trapped.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the strangest thing you've ever apologized for? I think we have 2 serial apologists on this on this episode today. So, Sarah, why don't you lead us off?
I think it's just got to be apologizing for apologizing.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to apologize. I'm sorry.
You apologize for giving a bad answer on a terrible game show.
Yep.
Matt, what about you?
I dropped my ice cream on the floor, or the ice cream fell out of the cone, and I thought that it had got on someone's shoes, but turns out they were further away. It was like a perspective thing. And then I tapped them on the shoulder and apologized. But to them, who didn't have ice cream on them, had no idea that I just dropped my ice cream. I literally just tapped them on the shoulder and said, "I'm sorry."
Nice.
That's pretty bad.
That's rough. Okay, if you had to describe your personality as a flavor, what would it be? Matt, we'll start with you again.
I would love to reposition this and say, what would you describe my personality as in a flavor?
Oh, man. That's
I'd like to say sour.
No.
Some people enjoy sour, but like it's a little bit abrasive.
No.
You know what? I think it might be like one of those salty Dutch licorices. I think that's your personality.
Oh, that's not very nice.
Oh, see, I was going to go with like sugar toast.
No.
These are some very different answers. This is fascinating.
Well, toast is very toasty, right? Like toast, and then you put the little, and it's got the granules, so it's like, and then there's the sweetness.
Now, when was the last time that sugar toast made you feel bad about yourself and question every part of your being? God. Oh, no.
Oh, I thought you meant like a delicate, like French toast kind of thing. No, just like thrown in bread with sugar on. Okay. That's a different tone for my personality.
Piece of toast out of the toaster with some brown sugar.
All right. Sarah, if you had to describe your personality as a flavor, what would it be?
My first thought was just Rocky Road.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. There's some swirls. There's some nuts. There's all kinds of things going on in there.
That's a perfect answer. All right. 0 points to Matt. 10,000 points to you, Sarah. 0 points to Matt. Matt does get 5,000 points for apologizing for nothing. And I like the title of your book better, Sarah. So you get 1 point for that. Matt also gets a point because it was also just a good title.
I'm happy with that.
As always, a lot of fun.
Yes. All right.
Love
you both.
Love you both.
Love you both. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you're enjoying the show, we'd love it if you could subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also leave us a rating or review. It's one of the best ways to support the Random but Memorable podcast, and we always enjoy reading your feedback. We're also a community-led podcast, so if you have any questions for us to answer in Ask One Password, topics, requests, or even guests that you'd like to hear from, please send us a message to podcast@onepassword.com. We read all of your comments and look forward to hearing from you. We hope you join us next episode for plenty more random moments in the world of cybersecurity.